New details about the man accused of setting fire to Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's residence in Harrisburg.
We experienced an attack not just on our family, but on the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Now, for the first time, the district attorney tells us he has evidence that the governor may have been targeted because he is Jewish.
And new tonight, a suspect is in custody after the alleged arson attack at the home of Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro.
Josh Shapiro wasn't supposed to be a target, but fire doesn't need permission. Just hours after he posted a peaceful Passover message, someone crept through the shadows, climbed the fence of the governor's mansion, and tried to burn it all down, while Shapiro, his wife, and their children were sleeping inside. A man with a hammer and Molotov cocktails turned a home into a battlefield, and what he left behind wasn't just damage, but a huge trauma and fear in the community. The fire that was meant to silence power. It didn't start with an explosion. It started with a walk. A man alone in the night, fueled by hate and gasoline, crept toward the governor's mansion in Harrisburg like a ticking bomb. Hours earlier, Governor Josh Shapiro had posted a simple message for Passover, words of peace, reflection, and tradition. Hours later, fire would rage through the walls of that same home. The message didn't reach everyone. One man had already decided that night would end in destruction. Before we dig deeper, know this. The fire was only the beginning, and what investigators uncovered next is far more disturbing than anyone was prepared to face. This wasn't just a fire. It was a targeted strike, a real-world act of domestic terror in the shadows of Pennsylvania's capital. And as horrifying as that sounds, it barely scratches the surface. What happened inside that grand home was no accident. It was personal. It was planned. And according to the suspect's own words, it was only the beginning. The man who climbed the fence and threw those firebombs wasn't some faceless stranger. His name is Cody Balmer, age 38, a resident of Pembroke, just over 3 miles from the governor's mansion. No job, no spouse, a life unraveling slowly and publicly. On social media, he didn't hide his beliefs. His posts were angry, his memes were violent. His thoughts were buried in anti-government rage and rejection of nearly every political voice in power. And when he looked at Governor Josh Shapiro, a Jewish man leading one of America's biggest states, he saw someone he wanted to hurt. Balmer didn't just want to make a statement, he wanted to cause harm. In fact, according to police documents, if he had come face-to-face with Shapiro that night, he planned to use a hammer to beat him. That wasn't metaphor. That was the plan. The hammer was real. So were the Molotov cocktails he made from gasoline and beer bottles. And when he crossed the iron fence that guarded the mansion, he wasn't acting out a fantasy. He was executing an intent to eliminate. Just before 2 in the morning, fire bloomed behind broken glass. Balmer had smashed his way through one of the mansion's windows and hurled the first explosive device into the piano room. It shattered, flames flared, smoke spread. In another room, just feet away, the governor and his family were asleep. The second bomb was tossed into the dining room. Sparks of violence lit the halls of power. Surveillance footage captured the entire attack. A man dressed in black, one yellow glove, one orange glove, a hammer in one hand, a bag of explosives in the other. The cameras followed him, breaking windows, lighting fires, and finally fleeing the scene, running through the shadows and climbing back over the fence as flames began consuming part of the home's interior. This was not just a property crime. This was not vandalism. It was attempted homicide. It was terrorism, and the man behind it wasn't part of any cell, wasn't dispatched by any larger group. He acted alone, but with a purpose that could ripple across political lines, religious identity, and public safety. The mansion, designed in the late 1960s and home to 8 governors before Shapiro, now holds scars from a moment of modern hate. Inside, the smell of smoke still lingers. Furniture has been scorched, paint has blistered off the walls, and the echoes of what could have happened, what almost happened, continue to haunt every corner of the residence. Balmer later told police he knew people were home. That was the point. He wasn't hoping for an empty house. He intended harm and he accepted the consequences. In fact, after the attack, he didn't run far. Instead, he confessed. He turned himself in. First to an ex-girlfriend telling her what he had done and asking her to call the police. Then directly to a state trooper. Balmer walked into a station, said he was responsible for the fire, and admitted his deep-seated hatred for Governor Shapiro. So why did he do it? That's the part that's both horrifying and frustrating. There was no manifesto, no clear allegiance to a political movement. His beliefs were scattered, anti-Biden, anti-Trump, anti-everything. Online, he reposted images of Molotov cocktails with phrases like, "Be the light you want to see in the world." In real life, he turned that image into action, twisting light into fire, turning philosophy into destruction. Ballmer's criminal past had been growing. In 2015 and 2016, he pleaded guilty to forgery and theft. He altered checks. He stole money. In 2023, he was charged with assault, but nothing in his file said arson. Nothing said attempted a horrible crime. Until now, a fence, a flame, and a failing system. This wasn't supposed to be possible. The governor's mansion is more than just a home, it's a symbol. It's watched over by cameras, gates, guards, and layers of security that stretch deeper than most people realize. But somehow, in the quiet hours of a sacred holiday, that system broke. A man with nothing to lose scaled the wall, crossed the yard, and shattered the illusion of safety with one swing of a hammer. That raises the question no one wants to answer. If someone can do this to a governor, who's really safe? The timeline is damning. Security footage paints a picture clearer than words. Ballmer, in dark clothes, crosses the boundary of state protection like it's nothing. He doesn't sneak, he walks, he doesn't hesitate. He knows exactly where to go. First, the piano room, then the dining room. 2 targets, 2 firebombs. No panic, no second thoughts. It's as if he's done this before, only this time the stage was larger. And the warning signs? They weren't buried. They weren't hidden deep in the web. They were public. His social media posts over the years were dripping with rage. Anti-authority, anti-government, anti-structure. He told people to become ungovernable. He shared Molotov memes and made jokes about violence. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't quiet. It was a slow boil, left unattended. What's worse, Ballmer wasn't on any watch list. He didn't need to be. Our systems don't track lone wolves until they've already sunk their teeth in. Unless someone's waving a red flag with a manifesto, they slide through the cracks, until they break through a governor's window and light a fire meant to eliminate. But Ballmer's attack wasn't just about chaos, it was layered. He picked a moment tied deeply to faith. A Jewish governor. A historic home. The first night of Passover. There are no coincidences when the flames are lit that deliberately. There's intent and there's silence from those who don't want to name it. Hate crime? Possibly. Domestic terror? Certainly. Political violence? Absolutely. But where are the answers? In the aftermath, Josh Shapiro didn't hide, he didn't retreat. He stood in front of cameras and said what no one else would. This kind of violence is not okay.
This type of violence is not okay.
It wasn't a speech, it was a warning. It wasn't about partisanship, it was about survival. And still, people wanted to know, how did it get this far? Start with the background. Cody Ballmer didn't just appear. He was molded by years of decline. He served in the military, sure, but he never deployed. He worked jobs that faded into nothing. He had brushes with the law, petty theft, forgery, and open assault case. And yet there were no serious interventions, no mental health checks, no system stepped in before he escalated from minor crimes to attempted assassination. In court, he told the judge he wasn't mentally ill. He didn't take medication. He lived with his parents and had a lot of children, though no one knows how many. He had no job, no income, no path. When asked about past arrests, he shrugged, said he'd missed a few court dates, as if it didn't matter. And maybe to him, it didn't. Because this wasn't about getting away with it. It was about making a statement. When he turned himself in, he didn't apologize. He confessed. He walked into the police station and said he was responsible. Not because he regretted it, but because he was proud. He wanted people to know who had done it. He wanted credit for the fear. Think about that. A man who nearly eliminated a state leader wanted his name in the record books, not buried, but branded. That's not desperation, that's ideology. Investigators say Ballmer walked for over an hour to the mansion, carrying Molotov cocktails made from beer bottles and gasoline. He drained a lawnmower to get the fuel. He prepared for violence, then he walked through the streets of Harrisburg completely unnoticed. Let that sink in. One man with homemade explosives moved across a capital city on foot and no one stopped him. No alerts, no patrols, no alarm bells. By the time he arrived at the mansion, everything had already failed. Inside the home, Governor Shapiro, his wife Lori, and others were asleep. No one heard the first bottle break. No one saw the glow behind the walls. It was the quick response of law enforcement, state police already nearby, that stopped this from becoming something far worse. Officers who woke the governor, officers who rushed in while flames were spreading. If they had been minutes later, this story would be a eulogy. When hate finds a blueprint. This wasn't random, it didn't come out of nowhere, and it didn't happen in a vacuum. This was a slow build, a recipe made from years of neglect, fueled by online anger, and finally lit by one man's decision to act on the worst parts of himself. The tools were primitive, the rage was not. Cody Balmer didn't just bring fire to the doorstep of government power, he brought something even more dangerous: belief. He believed that Governor Josh Shapiro didn't deserve to lead. He believed the system had failed him. He believed that violence was not only necessary, but righteous. And he's not the only one who thinks that way. Scroll through Balmer's online life and it's all there. The breadcrumbs, the warnings, the memes calling for insurrection, the posts mocking both sides of politics, the rants against President Biden, the rejection of Trump, the obsession with ungovernability. He wasn't left or right. He was something else entirely, part of a growing storm of disillusioned people who want to watch institutions burn, just to feel alive in the ashes. 2 years ago, Balmer shared an image of a Molotov cocktail paired with the words, "Be the light you want to see in the world." That wasn't a joke, that was his creed. And on that Sunday morning, he didn't just post it, he lived it. He took that symbol and made it real. Not in a protest, not in a riot, in the dead of night alone with gasoline in his bag and destruction on his mind. That is the face of a new kind of domestic threat. One that doesn't wear a uniform or carry a flag, but one that thinks burning down a mansion is the same as lighting a torch for justice. And the scariest part, we don't have a name for that yet, not one that fits. Because this isn't organized terrorism in the traditional sense, it's not connected to a formal movement. But it's also not isolated madness. It lives online. It breathes in forums, social media threads, encrypted chats. It spreads not through plans, but through feelings, resentment, loneliness, rage, and once it sticks, it festers. It radicalizes in silence, until one day it walks into the real world holding fire. The truth is, our leaders aren't protected from this. Not really. The walls we build around them are physical. The threats we face now are ideological. They crawl through the cracks, they hide behind usernames and emojis. They don't need funding or training or orders, they just need someone to decide, today is the day. Balmer made that decision with full awareness. He told police he knew people would be home. He said he understood the consequences. He wasn't out of control, he was following through. And the irony? He wasn't hard to find. After the attack, it took just one phone call from an ex-girlfriend to bring him in. She told police he confessed to her, and within hours, he walked up to a trooper and turned himself in. Calm, direct, proud. There was no escape plan, no confusion. Just a man who believed he'd done what needed to be done. In court, he didn't plead for help. He didn't say he was misunderstood. He said he wasn't mentally ill. He said his past actions, the ones before this, were the result of different behaviors. Vague, ominous, deliberate. When asked about his personal life, his answers were scattered. He lived with his parents. He hadn't worked in years. He had a lot of children, though it's unclear what that meant. It was like he had no tether to anything. No job, no partner, no home of his own. Just rage, wandering through a man who no longer cared what happened next. That lack of connection isn't a side note. It's the root. Because when people lose their place in the world, some fall into despair, but others reach for fire. And in Balmer's case, he didn't just want to be seen, he wanted to be feared. Now let's talk about what could have happened. Because as bad as this was, it could have been worse. A lot worse. Had the flames spread faster, the entire family could have been trapped. Had the incendiary devices landed differently, the blaze might have engulfed the upper floors before anyone knew what hit them. Had the state police not been nearby, we'd be talking about fatalities, not evacuation. And had Balmer entered with a weapon instead of bombs, this story would read like an assassination attempt. This wasn't a message. This was a mass casualty event that barely missed. The fire next time. The damage has been assessed. The intruder is in custody. The governor and his family are safe, for now. But the fire that tore through the walls of Pennsylvania's most protected home left behind more than burnt wood and blackened brick. It left behind a question, the kind that hums just below the surface, louder with each passing day. If this can happen here, what happens next? The system did what it always does, reacted. The mansion was secured. Investigators swarmed the scene. Balmer was charged with attempted homicide, aggravated arson, terrorism, and more. There will be trials. There will be reports. There will be press conferences. And still none of that will solve the root problem. Because what happened on that night was never just about one man. It was about a fragile national thread stretching thinner than ever, and this fire nearly snapped it. Security footage gave us facts. Court records gave us context. But what neither can give us is peace of mind, because the real takeaway from this attack isn't what was done, but how easily it was done. A man with a bag full of gasoline and a hammer walked into a governor's home and set it ablaze while the first family slept inside. That isn't just a failure, that's a fracture, and no amount of hindsight can fix what's already been exposed. Let's rewind. The governor's mansion sits along the Susquehanna River, 29,000 square feet of stately architecture and historic symbolism. 8 governors have lived there, dozens of foreign dignitaries have visited. It's been a fortress of political continuity. But that night it was just a target. It didn't matter how many cameras were watching or how high the fence stood. Balmer wasn't deterred, and that tells us something terrifying. The illusion of security is no longer enough. You can build bigger fences, you can hire more guards, but you can't build a wall against ideology. And what Cody Balmer carried that night wasn't just a bag of makeshift bombs. It was a belief that destruction speaks louder than debate. And in this country right now, he's not alone in that belief. This is where things get dangerous, because when political violence becomes familiar, it becomes normalized. When elected officials are targeted and it barely lasts one news cycle, we're not just dealing with broken laws, we're dealing with broken expectations. Violence used to be a last resort. Now, for too many, it's just another option. Another tweet, another fire, another day. Governor Shapiro knew that. That's why his response wasn't about fear, it was about warning. He didn't mince words. He called it what it was, an attack on the Commonwealth itself. And when he said he didn't care whether it came from the left or the right, he meant it. This wasn't about sides, it was about silence in the face of escalating danger. But here's the part no one wants to admit. We created the conditions for this. We let online rage become entertainment. We let conspiracy replace credibility. We watched as public trust eroded, and we shrugged. We argued over culture wars while real wars brewed inside people's heads. And while we were distracted by outrage, people like Balmer were taking notes. He wasn't part of a network, but he didn't need to be. In the age of digital radicalization, anyone can be a cell of one. And that's what should scare us. Not because it's impossible to stop, but because it's almost impossible to predict. Was this just one man's rage, or the first strike in a silent war against elected power in America? Tell us what you think, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.